I just had to change my name, CJ. My nickname during the show. It was Dr. 56K. Now it's Dr. 57K.
That's right, Doc. We are ripping to the upside. We're back above some critical levels here, and Bitcoin continues to show some tremendous strength. Love to see it. What's worth noting, though, and we'll talk about it a little more during today's episode, is kind of how the alts have been underperforming relative to Bitcoin. This is actually something that CJ and I have been talking a lot about, something we've been expecting, because this is something that we've seen in previous market cycles as well. So I'd like to expand on that. But I think all things considered, we're setting ourselves up for a pretty exciting week here, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too. Me too. And you're absolutely right, both of you. Not surprisingly, that the alts. I mean, even some of the strongest alts. Forget about Shiba Inu, but some of the Cardanos and HBAR and so forth, Solana. That I would say are some of the best and brightest futures out there. Even they are dwarfed by just this feeding frenzy in the king of cryptos, Bitcoin, right now. It's just, it's just like a planet. It's pulling all the gravity is pulling everything to Bitcoin right now.
Like a black hole. Liquidity.
And I will bet you that some of you traders out there, especially these two traders, are probably going to trade some and take some profits in the big king of crypto. But I don't want to steal your thunder. But I bet that some of you are going to say, well, Doc, I'm selling upside calls and I'm buying some puts here or whatever. Which one of you is going to be the first to say that?
Well, John, timing this market cycle is one of my favorite ways to play this market, and looking for when different participants are going to enter the space. And I think that one thing I'm going to look for as to when I'll be kind of taking some profit out of Bitcoin and moving back into alts is when we start seeing less significance on the institutional capital that's coming into the space and more influence from the retail capital. Right now, Bitcoin's price is still being driven, largely by institutional capital, large transaction volume. These are things we talked about last week on the show, but are still ringing true this week. And until we get that retail participation, I think the alts will kind of remain stagnant as Bitcoin keeps ripping. We have some retail traders putting some money in Bitcoin, but for the most part, this is a rally that's being driven entirely by institutional capital and whales. So I think that once we start to break Bitcoin's previous all-time high at around 64K, that's when we'll start to see that retail mania come back in. That's what we've seen historically. Once Bitcoin breaks previous all-time highs and enters that price discovery, that's when we really get risk on. Retail comes in. They don't look at just Bitcoin. They look beyond Bitcoin into the alts, and that's when we get those really parabolic rallies. And I feel like that point's just around the corner. So perhaps as we're approaching our previous all-time high at 64K, I'll be looking to lighten up some of my Bitcoin holdings and perhaps reallocate those into some of the more aggressive altcoin positions, because I think those are looking set to rally here soon. So that's just my perspective, but I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking as well.
Yeah, and to Monty's point, the first leg of the cycle, really the alts did not go crazy until about 20, 30K Bitcoin. So I do expect to see a little bit of the slingshot effect there as well. But why don't we go over Bitcoin, because we've got a new weekly candle and a lot to discuss in terms of price action. So the interesting thing is that we are now on the weekly chart only about 6% away from a new close of an all-time high, judging by that candle body close. Also, one thing that we talked about previously had to do with the True Strength Index, or the TSI, and how, crossovers below the zero line or very close to the zero line had historically marked bottoms or periods of time in which accumulation would have been pretty favorable for Bitcoin. For COVID, we got those as well. And then just recently, after we bounced off about 42K, we came close to that intersection in the TSI as well. But overall, weekly chart's looking very bullish. Fact that we've now created that higher high and really formed a nice bullish engulfing candle, breaking out of that symmetrical triangle. So all good there. In terms of critical levels on Bitcoin, we still have the oscillators showing a little bit of weakness as we continue to go up here, but the next critical level beyond 57 now is really 59, which is this previous lower high that we created really before that capitulation event ensued within the Bitcoin price. Also, something that's interesting and a resource that I just want to make you guys aware of is Levias, or how you really can measure Bitcoin options and locate max pain points. So if we go to expirations, namely the 12th or tomorrow, we have max pain at about 56K. And over here, you can see the volume of all expirations. So you can, see which expirations are in fact the most influential. And then you can get a very clear idea of where that max pain point is. So that really helps when understanding like pin risk. And then you also have the concept of gamma explosion, which I won't get into, but this is a really good resource for options data and something that I found very useful in the past couple days. But last thing I want to show before I pass it back to you guys is just Bitcoin log growth curves, because this has been a really nice indicator from a macro perspective historically with Bitcoin. And I want to highlight this midline level, which is the same thing as the midline level here on the growth curves. And our current cycle looks a lot like 2013 in the sense that we got a little overextended, but now we're actually coming back and starting to form that second leg of the cycle. And each time we've really crossed over that midline in the second half of the cycle, Bitcoin has seen rapid acceleration up to that top band. And the thing that I really like about this indicator is that it actually accounts for diminishing returns in Bitcoin on a log scale, because that is the nature of each halving. By definition, each new halving is exponentially less impactful than the prior one. But if we go here and really explore some of these targets, we're going to end up judging by this indicator at about $150,000 by January of 22. And so if we are to truly reach the top of that log growth curve and call that as a top for the market cycle, we could be seeing levels very similar to that. So I think that indicator is very interesting. Definitely recommend just checking it out and learning a little bit more about it. But I think it gives us a nice picture of what is to come end of year.
Yeah, absolutely, CJ. And, one thing I saw on Twitter being pointed out is the fact that we are very, very close to minting a new all-time high in terms of monthly candles. Our last monthly candle topped at about 57K. So we are right there. But I want to just quickly kind of zoom in a little bit and provide some perspective on a shorter term time frame, because I think that looking at, Bitcoin in terms of the critical levels we're seeing now, I think it's actually painting a pretty bullish picture. We managed to get above some highly critical levels where we are seeing some pretty strong resistance. So as you can see here, I got the fib retracements on my Bitcoin chart, and this 56K level is a level that had lots of people concerned. There was a strong amount of sell pressure at this level. We moved up to this level very quickly with this nice strong daily candle here that we had last week. And as a result, we saw a pretty significant amount of profit taking going on from traders that have been riding this trade for months and got in around here at the bottom, or even for traders that have just been riding this trade for a couple of weeks and that got in here. This was an ideal level to take profits given the critical significance of 56K and also just the velocity at which we made this move. But I was very encouraged by the relentless buying we saw even at this new high price point of around 55 to 56K. We still saw big players stepping in, still saw high average transaction volume, and we still saw, whales speculating very positively on Bitcoin. And because of that, this morning, we were able to climb back above this critical 56K level and continue to make, new higher highs here in the interim. So I'm very encouraged by what we're seeing on a shorter term time frame. And if you combine that with what CJ was just talking about from a more macro perspective and what we're seeing in terms of, some more larger term time frames, I think it's looking very positive for end of year and also perhaps to continue this rally into the start of next year as well. So back above 56K, Very, very positive sign here for Bitcoin. And I think that this, like I mentioned earlier, is really the next level to watch. And once we approach this level, I'm really going to consider, taking a look at some more altcoins, because I think that this price point here and breaking above this kind of marks the point at which we'll see retail participation in that altcoin mania that everyone is so fond of at the end of market cycles.
Yeah. Well, I had a quick one to share with you, Monty and CJ. I'm sure you guys saw it. And this is news that was just breaking in the last few days. It's not brand new, but BTCR is a symbol for an ETF which the SEC has approved. As you might imagine, it is not a Bitcoin ETF. It is instead yet another way to play Bitcoin and some of the cryptocurrency space. What they're doing is it's a company called Volt Crypto Industry Revolution, and it will track the Bitcoin industry revolution, so they say. Now, we know the real revolution is right here, but nonetheless, the sorts of stocks, because that's what they will hold, are stocks. They will be MicroStrategy, MSTR, Mara, which is Marathon Digital Holdings. 80% of their net assets will be invested in crypto stocks. And the SEC's approval of the fund, which will indeed trade under BTCR, comes just days after they delayed their decision on 4 Bitcoin ETFs, which is no surprise. There was almost no chance they were going to approve those Bitcoin ETFs for a whole bunch of reasons, not the least of which is they would have to agree on, okay, how are we going to determine settlement? Is it just the last tick before midnight? Because again, Bitcoin never sleeps. If you're talking about that ETF, which exchanges would you take a blended close right at, for instance, midnight Greenwich Mean Time? What time is a big thing? And then, because again, you're pegging the value of it to that exact moment. And we've seen the sorts of volatilities that can occur with the likes of, crude oil when it went to negative last year. Now, granted, it's not quite the same with Bitcoin. You don't have to find storage for crude oil, Bitcoin rather, like you do for crude oil, because that future turns into crude oil at expiration. And so you have to be able to take delivery in Cushing, Oklahoma. And, obviously next to nobody had that ability. So that's why they basically sold it into negative territory. But there are various issues like that you have to address before you can bring out a crypto ETF, and they have not been addressed yet. So the best you can get right now is something like this, where, Gary Gensler would obviously approve a basket of stocks that are publicly traded. And I would say you should have things like Hut 8 and a bunch of those miners in there, not just people that buy it and hold it like MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor. But nonetheless, it's one more thing that's kind of keeping the focus on Bitcoin and crypto right now, as we're talking about it, and it screams through 57,000, up about 3.5% right now.
Yeah, John, and I think that this is a great news piece. It's kind of indicative of what we were just talking about in terms of the market cycle timing and when the retail participants are going to come in and who's currently participating in the space. Because if we look back to 2020 and what we saw around the time of October 2020, when Bitcoin started to make some moves, we were seeing very similar things. We saw a big push from institutions to create these on-ramps for Bitcoin investors, whether it be through ETFs, through crypto-related equities, or whether it be through futures or options. This is something that typically precedes that mania, is a push for new institutional on-ramps. And although, like you pointed out, this is just kind of a way to get exposure into crypto-related equities, I do still think it speaks to the fact that there is increasing demand. Institutions are trying to address that demand, And what we see is typically that demand precedes that retail mania. So again, I think it's very encouraging, very reminiscent of what we saw at the end of 2020. And I think that bodes well for what we're going to see here in Q4 as well.
I'll also toss out Monty and CJ that Bill Miller, who you guys probably know had one of the best track records for years and years, still a very good track record, but he was like one of the go-to guys for trading and hedge fund management. And he is now touting Bitcoin, and he says Coinbase and Tesla, their values could be rivaled by Bitcoin, and his crypto wager is similar to his Amazon bet, he says. And that's coming from a legendary old school investor that says he sees massive upside for Bitcoin in particular. He didn't talk about all that many altcoins, but definitely his crypto wager is big, I guess. Again, I don't know what the size of it would be, but he's talking seriously about Bitcoin and whatever that is. Business Insider just published that story.
Go ahead, CJ.
Altcoins, any? I want to cover ETH, but anything you guys want to cover as well before we jump into that?
How about you start us off with ETH, because I do see someone in the comments, and I saw that Mr. AJ Monty, the Oracle, was making some rather bearish predictions for ETH. So curious to hear what your thoughts are on that, CJ. Maybe you can quell some fear that I'm seeing here in the chat.
Yeah, so I actually think ETH looks pretty bullish. Not only from a fundamental point of view where more and more ETH is getting burned and whatnot, but this looks very similar technically to Bitcoin before we had that recent breakout. Overall, you have a very large macro cup and handle structure that has broken out to the upside, which is very bullish. It hints at a continuation and a potential break of new all-time highs, which I think is definitely likely, judging by what we have in Bitcoin. And then you have an even more bullish microstructure at the end of this cup and handle. You actually have an inverse head and shoulders pattern where you have supply absorption on the sell-off of the left shoulder. You have more supply absorption at the head. And then we now have had that increase past the 20 smooth moving average to create that new trend. And, really the only thing holding us back now is a breakout of that neckline. So, I'm not going to enter anything short term for ETH yet. However, my trigger level to enter a bullish trade would be a breakout of the neckline of this head and shoulders pattern, which would be roughly 3,600. So for those reasons, I think ETH actually looks quite bullish right now. I think the only thing that could be seen as bearish is really just the CCI turning down. But overall, I think if you look at the broader structure in the CCI, this is actually quite healthy because it's returning to the zero line, which has historically been very good support and resistance for crypto assets. So, as long as that holds and, we continue to see bullish momentum, it looks very likely, in my opinion, that we're going higher with ETH. And it was actually going to be my Doge of the day because, Bitcoin has gone first, but Ethereum is usually the second one to follow. So.
Yeah, absolutely, CJ. I mean, we talk about that flow of capital model, and in many ways, I think ETH is kind of the gateway to the alts. And, John, you talked about when we might be looking to take some money out of our Bitcoin positions and look into the alts. I think one potential precursor to that altcoin move will be an Ethereum move. So I agree with you, CJ. I think that although it's lagging a little bit behind Bitcoin right now, I still think that once people start to move into that more risk-on attitude that we typically see during the tail end of these market cycles, ETH will be one of the first to move, followed by many of the alts that we know and love.
What point do you guys pull the trigger on some more Solana? I mean, beginning of October, it's $175. It has bled off now to what, 147, 148. At what point do you take a little stab here at seeing this one make a move back above 160, back towards that 170 level? Or do you not think that's in the cards? Because I'm seeing a pickup in volume in there pretty good right now.
Yeah, John, I do think that move, back up to previous all-time highs is in the cards. But I think that, like we keep talking about, I think it's going to come when we get that more risk-on attitude, more retail participation in this space. Right now, I still think we're pretty early in this market cycle in the sense that the participants are largely players that have been in this space for years, whales, institutions, not necessarily your everyday retail trader. I think that they will speculate on Solana. And I think if we look at what kind of led to Solana going parabolic in the first place, a lot of it had to do with ETH. ETH first going parabolic, then becoming congested. So I think that, back to what CJ and I were just talking about, is sort of that gateway to the alts. I think that if ETH makes a big move, and we start to see a similar kind of network congestion or a high amount of speculation on the Ethereum blockchain, then that will lead to another period of intense speculation in competitive chains like Solana, like Cardano, like HBAR, AVAX. What we saw during that mania in August and September, I expect to resume once we start to see some strength in ETH, which, like we keep saying, I think will, just follow right behind that Bitcoin breaking into new all-time highs. So right now I'm not touching it, but I will definitely be touching it if we see that move from ETH. I will look to assets like Solana, like Atom, like AVAX, and like HBAR.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, from a technical perspective, I really like Solana still. I like it fundamentally as well. I think it's really nice that a lot of the individuals who made a lot of money had their opportunity to sell into price and actually get out, so that it'll allow the ability for the asset to run further to the upside in the next trend. But for me, it would be a break above that downward sloping trend line. Ultimately, a bullish engulfing candle, something like that, which would show us, all right, we have likely momentum now to break a new all-time high. Whether that level be, 155 to roughly 165, I would say. So.
Yeah. In terms of dojis of the day, I just want to quickly share just a couple I'm looking at. I saw some questions in the chat about StormX. I still am very bullish on StormX. Last week, StormX performed very well. And I want to just pull up its chart right now because I think that looking at StormX, that's what I would consider a retail flyer. This is one that, we talk about in terms of a very retail focused asset, clear cut utility. Simon Yu is very active on Twitter. He has done a great job of establishing various partnerships. And as you can see, this is one of the lowest cap assets on Voyager. When we started to really pump in Bitcoin, this showed some very positive signs of strength as well. Made about 100% move in just over 2 weeks. So once we hit this kind of critical level here at about just over 4 cents, we got rejected. They're not coming back down. But I want to tie this in with another alt that I'm watching closely here, because I think that we're seeing a lot of similarities between StormX and OMG. And I think that just has to do with the fact that they are of a similar market cap, of a similar focus in terms of who is participating in these assets. So let's take a look at what we're seeing here with OMG. Obviously this thing showed some very, very positive price action 2 weeks ago. Now is being rejected. But what I like that we're seeing today is, this nice bullish engulfing candle here that's coinciding with some positive price action in Bitcoin. I think that this is an asset that is potentially benefiting a bit prematurely from that risk on attitude that we keep talking about, just because of its very, very low market cap here. So I'll be watching OMG and StormX. I saw a question about StormX specifically in the chat and whether or not I think that StormX will reach its previous all-time highs by end of year. I do think it will. I think that StormX is set to hit 10 cents by end of year. And looking at its current price, that may seem a bit far-fetched, but this is an asset, like I keep pointing out, that is largely retail focused, clear-cut retail utility, and is going to move very, very fast given its low market cap. So I've been holding it, very encouraged by what we saw just last week. And I think that, by end of year, we will see StormX back up at the 10-cent level. So I'll be watching StormX and OMG. Those are two potential doges of the day that I'll be watching here this week.
Fantastic. Well, as always, guys, great info. Remember, you can join the guys in the crypto room by going to marketrebellion.com/get or try crypto. That's marketrebellion.com/try crypto. And don't forget, you can also get $25 in Bitcoin by going and joining Voyager Digital, trading crypto for free like I do, and getting paid up to double digits for coins that you leave on that Voyager Digital. That is for coins like Polkadot, which I think is still up over 11% that they're paying for that. And if you type in Rebel 25, you'll get $25 in Bitcoin just for signing up.
And one more thing I do want to share.
One more?
In the new platform, just has to do with sentiment data and the point that Monty was making about OMG. If we look at relative social volume and the number of posts that we've actually been seeing, OMG has been in the top 10 here for past couple days now. Relative sentiment up there as well in terms of 74. So if you guys would like access to this and be able to learn more, not only about technical analysis and sentiment analysis, please try that link down in the left corner, marketrebellion.com/try crypto. And don't forget, if you are currently a member, we have our Refer a Friend program. So if you like it and want to share it with somebody, think it'll be helpful for them, you will get $25 and they will get $25 as well off their first month subscription. So we appreciate that, guys, but that's all I got. I'll leave it with you, gentlemen.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We appreciate it very much, and we'll be back again tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Crypto Byte. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.